Graham crackers. You know them. You have probably eaten thousands of them. Crushed up in a cheesecake crust, sandwiched around a melted marshmallow at a campfire, or just grabbed straight out of the box as a midnight snack. They are one of the most familiar foods in America. Sweet, crunchy, and completely harmless. Or so you would think. But here is something most people never think about. Why are they called Graham crackers? Who is Graham? And why did he make them? The answer is one of the strangest origin stories in the entire history of American food. The Graham cracker was not invented to be delicious. It was invented to stop people from thinking about sex. The story of how that happened involves riots, a fired professor, a cult-like following, and one of the biggest corporate betrayals a dead man never got to see. The man behind the cracker was a Presbyterian minister named Sylvester Graham, born in 1794 in Suffield, Connecticut. He was the youngest of 17 children. His father was a 72-year-old clergyman who died when Sylvester was just 2 years old. His mother struggled with mental health issues, and young Sylvester was passed around to various relatives throughout his childhood. One of those relatives ran a tavern, and watching what alcohol did to the people around him left a deep mark. He grew up hating alcohol at a time when most Americans considered it as normal as water. But alcohol was just the beginning. Graham's real obsession was something far stranger. By 1830, Graham had become an agent for the Pennsylvania Temperance Society, but he was not content just fighting alcohol. Graham became obsessed with a much bigger idea. He believed that the human body was a kind of moral machine. If you fed it the wrong fuel, it would malfunction. And the worst malfunction of all, in his mind, was lust. Graham was convinced that sexual urges, and especially masturbation, were the root cause of blindness, insanity, and physical decay. He called it self-pollution, and he considered it the single worst sin a person could commit. But here is where it gets interesting. Graham believed the cure was not prayer or punishment. The cure was food. His theory went like this. Rich, flavorful food excited the body and inflamed desire. Meat made people act like animals. Spices overstimulated the senses. Sugar, alcohol, and caffeine all pushed the body toward moral collapse. Even hot food was dangerous. Graham was convinced that eating warm meals could trigger sinful thoughts. So he designed an entire diet built around one principle: blandness. No meat, no spices, no sugar, no coffee, no tea, no tobacco, nothing that tasted good enough to make your body want more. Just water, fruits, vegetables, and bread made from his own special recipe of unbleached, unsifted, whole wheat flour. He called it Graham flour. In 1829, he used that flour to create a cracker. It was brittle, flavorless, and deliberately harsh to chew. That was not a flaw. That was the entire point. The cracker was designed to be so boring that your body would calm down and your mind would stop wandering to sinful places. Graham believed it could suppress sexual desire, particularly in young men and adolescent boys. And for a while, people actually bought into it. When the cholera pandemic reached New York in 1832, Americans were terrified. The accepted medical advice at the time was to eat plenty of meat and drink port wine. Graham said the opposite, and when his followers seemed to fare better than most during the outbreak, his reputation exploded overnight. It was probably a coincidence, but it did not matter. The public was scared, and Graham had answers. Suddenly, he was drawing crowds of up to 2,000 people to his lectures across New York and New England. He packed as much fire and brimstone into his talks as any revival preacher, warning audiences that their diets were destroying their bodies and their souls. His followers called themselves Grahamites, and they took it seriously. How seriously? They built boarding houses across the country where residents followed rules that would make a military barracks look comfortable. Cold baths every morning, hard mattresses with no feather beds, windows open year-round, even in winter, and of course, nothing but graham bread, plain vegetables, and cold water to eat and drink. Ralph Waldo Emerson called Graham the poet of bran and pumpkins. A newspaper in Massachusetts had a less generous take. They called him Dr. Bran, the philosopher of sawdust pudding. But not everyone was just making fun of him. Some people were genuinely angry. Butchers and bakers watched Graham tell their customers to stop buying meat and store-bought bread, and they saw him as a direct threat to their livelihoods. The backlash turned physical. In 1834, a mob attacked the Temple Street Church in Portland, Maine, where Graham was delivering a lecture on sexual physiology to an audience of women. They threw rocks and bricks through the church windows. 3 years later in Boston, butchers and bakers organized and marched on the hotel where he was speaking. Graham's supporters climbed onto the roof and shoveled bags of lime down onto the angry crowd to drive them back. A Presbyterian minister caused actual street riots over bread. That is how seriously people took this man and his crackers. At its peak, Grahamism even infiltrated higher education. Around 1840, Oberlin College in Ohio adopted the Graham diet for its entire student body. A devoted Grahamite named David Campbell was brought in to run the dining hall and enforce the rules. Meat, coffee, tea, wine, and all seasonings were banned. Students who needed meat had to wait 11 months while the administration debated whether to even allow it. One professor named John P. Cowles committed the ultimate crime. He brought a pepper shaker to the dining hall table, not a bottle of whiskey, not a steak, a pepper shaker. He was fired. The students were miserable. They called the food state prison fare. They nicknamed the meals swill, starch slosh, and dishwater. Some snuck out to local taverns just to eat a real dinner. By 1841, the students had had enough. They organized a mass meeting and formally argued that the Graham diet was, and this is a direct quote, inadequate to the demands of the human system as at present developed. The college dropped the diet shortly after. Campbell and his anti-flavor crusade were shown the door. Graham himself faded from public life in the 1840s. His ideas grew more extreme, and his following shrank. He had never patented Graham flour or branded the cracker. He never made a single cent from the product that bore his name. He died in 1851 at the age of 57, and the manner of his death became its own kind of dark punchline. He passed away from complications after receiving opium enemas prescribed by his doctor. The man who promised his diet could help people live to 100 did not make it to 60. His critics had a field day. But here is the thing about radical ideas. They do not always die with the person who had them. Sometimes they find someone even more committed to carry them forward. One of Graham's most devoted followers was a doctor named John Harvey Kellogg, who ran the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan. Kellogg believed the exact same things Graham did. Bland food was the key to moral purity. Flavor was the enemy. In 1878, Kellogg created granola, directly inspired by Graham's teachings. Then one day, his brother Will accidentally left some cooked wheat sitting out too long. When they ran the stale wheat through the rollers anyway, it came out in hard, flat flakes instead of sheets. Cornflakes were born. John wanted to keep them bland, just like Graham would have wanted. His brother Will saw a business opportunity and added sugar. That disagreement split the family apart, but it also built a cereal empire that is now worth billions of dollars. Two of the most iconic breakfast products in American history, cornflakes and granola, both exist because of a man who thought flavor would make you immoral. And then there is the cracker itself. In 1898, the National Biscuit Company, which would later become Nabisco, started mass-producing graham crackers. But they made one change that would have made Sylvester Graham lose his mind. They added sugar, then honey, then cinnamon. Then they started making them with bleached white flour, the one ingredient Graham had spent his entire career crusading against. He once called refined white flour the most miserable trash imaginable. In 1925, Nabisco launched the Honey Maid brand. a sweeter version that became a household name almost overnight. Right around the same time, Girl Scouts at a camp in Connecticut popularized a campfire recipe that paired those sweet crackers with melted Hershey chocolate and toasted marshmallow. They called the treat s'mores. Within a few decades, it became the unofficial dessert of every American summer camp, backyard bonfire, and family vacation. So let that sink in for a moment. The graham cracker was invented by a man who believed that flavor itself was a gateway to sin. He designed his cracker to be as joyless and tasteless as possible. He wanted it to crush desire. And today, that same cracker is the foundation of one of the most indulgent, sticky, chocolatey, gooey treats in American culture. A treat so irresistible that its name literally means, "Give me more." Sylvester Graham would have hated every single bite. And honestly, that might be the best part of the whole story.